The fake security truck exploded right at my property line. Not violently, mind you. It was more of a sputtering, backfiring mess of spray-painted decals and amber lights from the auto parts store with a megaphone duct taped to the roof playing a loop that said, "This is a private community. Please disperse." It died in a cloud of smoke at the base of my cattle gate after attempting to chase my rooster off my own land. I stood on my porch in my work boots and morning coffee in hand, watching this disaster unfold. Then I calmly dialed 911. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name is Robert Garrison, and I'm a retired friar who keeps to myself on my modest 15-acre ranch on the outskirts of Mesa Springs, Texas. The town is about 60% HOA controlled and 100% nosy. My property, however, sits just outside the borders of the Sunset Ridge Estates HOA, which bothered one woman more than anyone else. Her name was Patricia Beaumont, HOA president, self-declared safety officer, and someone who firmly believed that my rooster, whom I call Colonel Feathers, was a threat to community tranquility. Patricia began her crusade against me subtly at first. She left complaint letters taped to my mailbox about unauthorized livestock noises, even though I wasn't part of her HOA. Then came photos slipped under my gate showing Colonel Feathers supposedly loitering near HOA grass lines. She actually drew red circles around my rooster with a marker and wrote "violation" in all caps. The woman was spending her days photographing a chicken from the street like some kind of poultry paparazzi. Things escalated when Patricia purchased a $1,200 surveillance drone and began piloting it over my property. She was terrible at flying the thing. On its third mission, it crashed directly into my water tower, which had a hand-painted sign that read, "No HOA zone." I kept the broken drone as evidence and stored it in my barn. She had the audacity to demand I return her property, but I told her she could retrieve it from the sheriff's office if she wanted to explain why she was conducting illegal surveillance. But her masterpiece of insanity came in the form of a 1997 Ford Ranger that she had wrapped in vinyl decals reading Sunset Ridge Security Unit. This monstrosity had an orange light bar bolted to the roof, no license plates, and was driven by her nephew, Derek, who I later learned had been banned from a local restaurant for impersonating a federal marshal. They began patrolling the road outside my property daily. And then they started actually trespassing under the guise of community enforcement. Derek would drive that fake patrol truck right up to my fence line, get out wearing a tactical vest he bought online, and take pictures of everything. My barn, my truck, my tractor, even my clothesline. Patricia sat in the passenger seat with a clipboard, writing down what she called infractions. They had a megaphone mounted on the truck that would blare messages like, "We know about your chickens, and this area is under HOA surveillance." The situation reached a breaking point on a Tuesday morning in October. I was in my workshop when I heard that ridiculous truck rumbling up my private drive. Not the public road, but my actual driveway, past my no trespassing signs, past my closed gate that they had somehow opened. Derek, in full security costume, complete with a badge he probably got from a Halloween store, was placing what looked like a parking ticket on my tractor. I walked out calmly and asked him what he thought he was doing. He puffed out his chest and handed me a laminated community citation for improper mechanical storage on a vehicle that was parked on my own property in my own barn. The citation had an official-looking seal that Patricia had clearly made on her computer and demanded a fine of $300 payable to the Sunset Ridge HOA. I took photos of everything, Derek and his costume, the fake patrol truck on my property, the citation, and told them they had 30 seconds to leave before I called the real police. Patricia got out of the truck and started yelling about how she had authority as HOA president. She actually said the words, "I am the law in this neighborhood," while standing on my private property where she had zero jurisdiction. What Patricia didn't know was that Sheriff Thompson of Mesa Springs was an old friend from my military days. We served together at Fort Hood, and he'd been to my ranch many times for barbecues. I called him directly and explained the situation. His response was immediate and serious. He told me to document everything and that what they were doing was criminal impersonation of a peace officer, a third-degree felony in Texas. The very next day, Sheriff Thompson rolled into Sunset Ridge Estates with 2 deputies. They went straight to Patricia's house where the fake patrol truck was parked in her driveway. I heard later from neighbors that Patricia came running out waving a copy of the HOA bylaws like it was the Constitution. She kept saying she had the right to protect her community. Sheriff Thompson asked her if she thought her HOA bylaws superseded Texas state law. They confiscated the truck on the spot as evidence. Derek tried to run back into the house but was stopped and questioned. Turns out he had been telling people around town that he was part of a private security force, and several residents thought he was an actual law enforcement officer. That upgraded the charges significantly. Within 24 hours, the county issued a cease and desist order on all HOA enforcement activities beyond their legal boundaries. Patricia and Derek were both served with criminal citations. Patricia was charged with conspiracy to impersonate a peace officer, criminal trespass, and harassment. Derek faced the impersonation charges directly since he was the one wearing the fake uniform and badge. The prosecutor's office took this very seriously. In Texas, impersonating a peace officer can carry up to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. The fact that they had entered my property under this false authority made it even worse. They had essentially conducted a fake law enforcement operation, complete with costumes, a vehicle designed to look official, and fraudulent citations. Patricia hired an expensive lawyer from Dallas who tried to argue that the truck was clearly marked as HOA security, not real police. But the prosecutor pointed out that they had installed emergency lights, used a megaphone to give orders, and Derek had identified himself as security enforcement to multiple witnesses. The fake badge and tactical vest didn't help their case either. Meanwhile, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. I wasn't there, but I heard from multiple sources that it was absolute chaos. Homeowners were furious that Patricia had potentially exposed the HOA to massive liability. They were looking at potential lawsuits from me and criminal charges that made their whole organization look like a bunch of vigilantes. The board's attorney advised them to distance themselves from Patricia immediately. The criminal trial was set for 3 months later. In the meantime, Patricia was prohibited from any HOA enforcement activities and had to surrender her drone equipment, all the surveillance photos she had taken, and any other materials related to her campaign against me. She was also ordered to stay at least 500 FT away from my property. The trial itself was almost comedic if it hadn't been so serious. The prosecutor presented evidence that included the megaphone recordings. The entire courtroom heard Derek's voice booming. "You are in violation of Sunset Ridge Peace Code 12B, unauthorized rooster emissions." The judge actually had to call for order because people started laughing. Then they showed photos Patricia had submitted as evidence, including one where she had photoshopped Colonel Feathers with glowing red eyes and labeled a threat to community safety. Patricia tried to defend herself by giving a presentation about how my rooster's crowing violated her interpretation of noise ordinances. She had charts showing decel levels and graphs of what she called disruption patterns. She actually used the phrase agricultural terrorism at one point, referring to my chickens. The judge was not amused. Derek took a plea deal pretty quickly once he realized he was looking at serious prison time. He agreed to testify against Patricia in exchange for probation and 500 hours of community service. His testimony revealed that Patricia had promised to make him the head of security for the HOA and had been paying him under the table from HOA funds, which added embezzlement to her charges. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Patricia was found guilty on all counts. The judge, clearly frustrated by the waste of court resources and the absurdity of the situation, gave her the maximum sentence. She was sentenced to 18 months in state prison, 3 years of probation after release, and fined $15,000. She was also ordered to pay my legal fees, which came to another $22,000. When the sentence was read, Patricia's face went completely white. She stood up and started screaming that this was a conspiracy, that I had connections in the sheriff's department, that the HOA would appeal. The judge warned her about contempt of court, but she kept going, yelling about how Colonel Feathers was a menace to society and that she was a patriot protecting her community. They had to physically escort her from the courtroom while she shouted about rooster revenge and agricultural anarchy. She was still screaming about filing appeals and constitutional rights as they led her away in handcuffs.